So, thank you all for joining us today. This is a Dolores Cannon Original Support Forum webinar, and today is the 10th of November, 2016, and I have with me a very special guest and friend, Lory Pollina, a wonderful practitioner and a truly great guy all around. He's got some great stories to share. So today, we are looking at discussing a couple of topics. By request, one was trance depth. There's a lot of discussion in our community about the somnambulistic state and the different brainwave states and hypnosis and visualization and where we are and where our brain state is during all of this. And we talk about that all the time. And what Dolores mostly talked about was the somnambulistic state and its importance in healing. And as I was thinking about how we were going to discuss that, I thought about Lory particularly because he has some really great stories, personal stories, very personal stories, where he can talk to you about what depth of trance he was in and how all that happened for him in various forms and stories he has of his own personal healings. And that's why I've asked Lory to join me today. But he's not the only one, okay? We want to talk about that practitioners all across the board are getting healing in sessions, sometimes during the interview portion of the session, okay? Sitting in those chairs. Sometimes, I mean, one of my best stories ever is of a woman just laying there who didn't participate in the session one way or another, that most people would have thought that was a complete and utter failure. And it was one of the most extraordinary outcomes I have had to date in 8 years. So, we need to talk about the somnambulistic state and possibly why it's not completely required for healing. And because Lory has such great stories, that's why I thought those two things might align nicely today. Your stories, and for you in the community to get to know Lory a little bit, his stories, and also, to pretty much talk around this topic about trance and trance depth. So I want to welcome everybody, but I want to especially welcome you, Lory. So I'm gonna start out by telling you all the first time I ever met Lory, and it's such a fond memory of mine. It was in September of 2014, which was going to end up being the last classes that Dolores Cannon would ever teach. And in real life, anyway, and I have such fond memories of this and very warm memories, and I know many of you out there have them as well. It was her largest class ever, and upon reflection and speaking with many of you after the fact, weeks, months, and even years after the fact, many of you knew what I also knew in my heart, which was that was going to be her last class, and it was. So anyway, I showed up early to open up the auditorium doors for the class, the level 1 class that day. And when I walked into the convention center, and it's like really early, and I don't know, probably have my coffee or something, and there's this fella standing right by the door, and that's Lory, and his eyes were like this wide, and he had like a notebook or something on his chest, and you couldn't contain the enthusiasm. It was so astonishing, just that meeting, the utter joy that was exuding from you and your body and about being there. It just warmed my heart then, and even now remembering it. And you, I think, already started to tell me your story, even there at the front door when I was unlocking the door to go in for the auditorium in the classroom. And so this is a really great place, I think, for you maybe to tell the story, Lory. I know I sent the link or put up the link, and we'll put the link up on this as well to go to your website, and people can read in text your story. But why don't you give us your story in your own words right now, Lory?
All right. I was at that front door much earlier, but nobody was there, so
I didn't know that.
I went for a cup of coffee and came back. But I was so excited to be there. And I guess I had been fresh off the miracle belt and just was so enthused to learn Dolores's technique. But I'll give you my story. I had a long history of soul searching and philosophic background, and was always searching for things and always trying to, awaken as best as I could. And I was living in Denver at the time. I had lived 20 years in Santa Fe as an artist, and moved to Denver and stayed with some friends of mine who had a big house, and I was able to stay with them and work a little bit for them. And so I was at their behest. I was trying to fit in there and be helpful and stuff like that. And I worked for them, and I practiced music and walked and made dinners for them. So I was constantly active at their house. And I had to go back to Buffalo, where I'm from, because my mom had passed away. And my brother, who had been her caretaker, was sort of just lost. He thought that she was going to be senile for the rest of eternity. And a close friend of mine said, "Oh, well, you should read Michael Newton's books, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls." And so I read them, and it was amazing in that I had believed in reincarnation, but my only venture to find out about it was the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And that was, it said you died, you came back, and you had 40 days to come back. It just didn't resonate with me. It didn't make sense. And so I never took it any further, but I did believe there was a spirit realm and all that. So I wanted to find out about the spirit realm. I read those books, and I was so turned on by it. I sent it to my cousin Janet, who the next day sent me a link to Dolores's Kevin Moore show. And it was just an audio. I didn't even see her. And so I was listening to it, and she just blew the top of my head off. It was like everything she said was just spot on and resonated in my body. I mean, I think she, opened up every chakra and then some, right away. And I said, I have to read these books, because she talked about her books. So I went to the library, and thanks to Dolores's method of interlibrary loan, which I suggest to everyone, I was able to get her all of her, I think it was 17 books at the time, through the Denver Library, which had none of those books on their own. And I read all 17 of them in a matter of 2 months. So I was just, everybody was making fun of me at the dinner table because I said, "You don't understand, this is too great." And it was just tremendous. And then I said to myself, well, I really have to study with her. I got this feeling like she wasn't going to, I was just flabbergasted that reading those books that she was still alive, number one, and number two, that she was still teaching. It was like, oh my God. But, I was very practical, and I said, all right, well, I'll get a session in Denver with a practitioner and see if I like the modality and, if it's something I think I can do. Because I had never done hypnosis. I do psychic work and spiritual counseling, but I was never really into hypnotherapy. So I had a session. The woman was lovely and very matter of fact. And she just said, no matter what, say okay when I asked to speak to your higher self. And so I did.
1:11. I'm just saying it's 1:11 as I'm checking the time. Go ahead.
Okay. So don't rush me, Candace. I'm just joking. So it wound up being that that when she asked I had a crooked back. My shoulders were uneven due to a childhood accident, and my sacrum was crooked, and my left foot was pronated and sort of just not lifeless, but I mean, I couldn't really walk on it. I just sort of used it almost like a peg leg. So the left leg was weird, the foot, and the left shoulder was a good, 2.5, 3 inches lower than my right shoulder. And I had continuously been suffering for the past maybe year and a half with really bad stiffness in the back that I couldn't abide by. So I was going to a chiropractor, but he wasn't helping. So she asked during, and I had a past life or two. It was working. I was a salamander and a space alien. But then she said, could Lory heal his back? And at that point, I was about as lucid as I am now. And I just sort of chuckled because it's like, I don't know, I hope so, is basically what I said. I was so light in trance. And that was the end of the thing. It was just sort of like lame. And I said goodbye to her, and she said, just give it a week or so. She says, and see what happens. So a week to the day was the 4th of July. We lived in a fancy part of the neighborhood where the country club was, and on the 4th of July, they let off all these bombs, explosions and stuff. I was home alone. I was practicing the cello, and my back was killing me. And I said, oh, I'll take a hot bath, and maybe I'll feel more. Well, wouldn't you know, one of those explosions came all the way to the house. I don't know how it happened, but I guess my higher self must have coordinated it, but it exploded right next to the bathroom window, and with boom, and it rattled the window, and the energy of this explosion went, rifled right through me. And the second that happened, I looked down, and the first thing I saw was my chest, and it was in a gray wool suit with gold buttons and a whole bunch of medals to the left. And I gathered immediately that I was wearing a Confederate outfit. I just looked down further, and I saw blood everywhere, and I looked down further, and I didn't have any legs, and I saw at a distance my legs. And it was so rivetingly real that I thought that I just said to myself, I'm dead. That's the end of my life. It's over. Oh my God, And then 1 second later, I realized I was in the bathtub. All of a sudden, it was like then. And I said, oh my God, this is the time now. It's the present is now, and I'm in a bathtub, and it's not that, and the relief from this traumatic experience was like overwhelming. And in fathoming this relief, I saw what looked like, like when you're looking at a grill and the heat waves come up. So I saw like an invisible heat wave or whatever of that trauma, apparently, like just lift out of me. I just saw it rise to the ceiling. And then I felt elated, but I was more like freaked out than elated. And I said, I am getting out of this bathtub right now. Like, voodoo bathtub or something. So I jumped out of the bathtub, and I dried off, and being crooked and like, older, I was obsessed with like how bad I'm looking, So I always looked in the mirror, to see how crooked I was and how old I was. And my shoulders were straight. And I said, what? This can't be. So I spent the next week, I didn't tell anybody. I spent the next week looking in the mirror, looking in reflections in shop windows, and tried to see if I was holding myself differently or whatever. And every time I looked perfectly straight. I also had a shoe lift because I had a special shoe. It had a metal arch in it and a shoe lift. And I walked every morning for like 3 miles. So I didn't take the shoe lift off because I just didn't believe that anything was really happened. And lo and behold, my back started to hurt. So I said, I'm going to just take it out and see if it, works, whatever. And all of a sudden it was fine. My back didn't hurt at all. And I just couldn't believe it. So I called her up a week later and I said, I waited a week. I tested everything out and, I feel completely, normal. My back is, and she said, oh yeah, that happens. She was like, she could care less. She could care less, but
Sure.
She was just so.
I heard that before.
Yeah, it was like just normal. So I immediately called up and booked the Dolores class, and I went to Arkansas, and that's why I was so excited, was because I had such a miraculous healing. Then we broke up at the end of the week into groups, and Cynthia Buckner was my partner, and one other person, Holly, I forget her last name, and we all did healings on each other. And what I noticed about Cynthia when Holly did her was that at one point she looked like she was having a heart attack or something. I was like looking at her like, what's going on? And afterwards she said, I felt like I was being electrocuted. She said, I will never doubt the SC because, it was so rivetingly painful, but like present. So I registered that in my head. And then she did, Cynthia, it was my turn, and Cynthia did me. And she said, the second time, the SC really came through. I was having a life as an eagle, and it was incredible. I mean, it was like a scope with lines. The vision was like a telescope on a naval ship or something. So if you look down, you can see the longitude and latitude lines. So if anything moved, you could zero in on it and pick it up. So being an eagle was fantastic. And towards the end, I felt like mud was being splashed in my eyes. And I said, well, what's this all about? And I looked down, and there I had a talon. And in the talon was a snake. And the snake must have been picked up from a river bed or something. And it was splashing wet mud in my eagle eye. And because I had tarried to just, figure out what that was, I heard in the distance like some voices. And I noticed they were saying, well, he doesn't, we're mean to him because he doesn't listen to us. And I realized that that was my own voice, that Cynthia had already begun the SC part, and that because I had dallied to figure out what the mud was, that I just sort of like bifurcated or something. And so that's what happened. So she said, well, and she was such a great practitioner, and she said, if Lory promises to do what you say, listen to you, will you heal his left foot? And the reason my foot was so lame was because of the calf muscles. They were like atrophied from not use, or the crooked spine or whatever. So I came back to Denver, and on the plane, I noticed something. I made a mental note of something that was going on in a cloud. It just was phenomenal or whatever. So when I finally listened to my tape, it said, look, it mentioned that cloud moment. The tape did. It was like they were trying to tell me, like, we're telling you the future or whatever. And then I said, what did I promise? Here I promised something. So I listened to the tape, and it said, you must rest. Well, it turned out that I have been an artist all my life, and never had funding from my family, so I was struggling to survive my whole life. And I did a great job up to like 57 years old or whatever, but it was getting hairy, and I was living with these people trying to save money. So I was just constantly efforting and trying to survive, trying to make money, trying to, get my career in art and music going all the time in different cities. And I was like bedraggled from all this, aggressive, survival. And it was kind of like that eagle. That was a similar message in that eagle past life. Anyhow, I said, all right. They said I have to rest. So I'm not going to get up at 6 in the morning and go walking. I'm not going to practice the cello before work. I'm not going to come home from work and, make dinner for everybody. I'm not going to make my macrobiotic lunches early in the morning. I'm just going to lay in bed and go to work and then come back and rest. So I did that for a month. And while I laid there, I had some realizations. And one of them was that I was telling everyone I was exploded by a bomb. And then I said, well, this was a civil war. There were no bombs. So it was a cannon. And then I said, oh my God, Dolores Cannon. And then I said, well, what does Dolores mean? I had a cousin named Dolores, and we always knew that meant pain in Spanish. Dolores means pain. So a painful cannonball stopped me from killing in the Civil War. And then Dolores Cannon in this life gave me new marching orders to be, doing healings and waking people up. So I realized I had 2 run-ins with Dolores Cannon in my life. And so that was the beginning of it. Then I realized, sort of the egregious errors of war and all that stuff. And I started to really decide to, make some shifts and really stop struggling and maybe let the universe start to do its half rather than me doing 3/4 and it doing, here and there. And so it said, if I did what it said, it would heal the leg in 2 months. Well, in a month and a half, I was sleeping in the middle of the night, and at midnight, it was the October 26th or whatever, I felt like I was being electrocuted. When I was a kid, I went to a fun house and they had a chair there that had a little volt going through it. So I knew what that felt like, supposed to be funny, but it wasn't. And so I didn't know what to do. And I realized if I deeply breathe, it will abate, because, deeply breathing is so great. So I did that, and 20 minutes later, it stopped. And I said, that must have been what happened to Cynthia, because it felt like how she looked. Mm-hmm. But thought no more of it, and I got up to go to work. I took a shower. I went to put my shoes on, and my foot would not fit into that metaled shoe. It was all built for a lame foot, and, it just wouldn't fit. So I had some sneakers that didn't have that setup in it, and I just realized I was standing on the edge of my foot correctly. It was like all of a sudden, usually I could pretend like I was standing correctly, but I couldn't hold it for more than a second. But now I was, without even thinking about it, I was completely standing on it correctly, and the muscle was in the calf was holding it up, no problem. And to this day, which is years later, I've not stood the other way. I've stood correctly. It did take 2 months of walking around the park very slowly and seeing how my right foot touched the ground when I walked, and then imitate it with my left, because I was just like, walk, slam my foot down, walk, slam my foot down. Now both feet started to walk correctly.
So you were relearning how to walk, because I think you were telling me when you were first telling me this story, you said you used to kind of just throw that foot.
Yeah, and then just plop it down, like, just like a piece of, steak or something, It was almost like a peg leg, although I had a foot on it.
And it was many, many years, right? My memory is that you were like
I was like 13 till 57 or something, yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
So, and to this day, I continually walk, and the arch, which wasn't there before, slowly over the years has carved out, just like water rubbing against a stone or something. So now I have an arch in both feet. And so that was amazing.
I'm going to stop you because I want to ask some questions, and
okay.
And I know you've got more stories to tell. But for people who are listening, I've been taking a few notes. So I want to mention some things, and then I want to ask you some questions, if that's okay. So the first thing is, and I'm learning. You know, you and I have talked many times since meeting in 2014, but I've because of the wonderful way you've told your story today, I've learned more about some of the timing and some of the things that were going on here. So when you had your very first initial session in Denver, you said you were a salamander and a space alien, but you did not experience a Civil War life. Is that true?
Not at all.
Isn't that interesting? So for the practitioners out there, think about this, right? You know, he didn't even go to the place that seems to be the impetus of what happened to your sacrum, right? You had a salamander and a space alien life. May I ask, what did you learn about those two experiences? Why did your higher self say that?
Well, I was surprised when you just started to ask how it all of a sudden it clicked in my head. This salamander, I was like I was at something like a salamander in the Vietnam War, you know?
Wow.
And it was like I was climbing up tanks and stuff, like these like light green tanks with like big, you know, nozzles on them or whatever a tank has to shoot the stuff. And I'm like, you know, like, what are these people doing? Where, you know, it was like you're in my jungle and all of a sudden we're killing each other. How ridiculous is this? So I climbed up to a tree and looked down at it and was just like baffled. So that's what clicked in my head, is like, it was sort of like, this is when I started to realize how war is maybe ridiculous, where in the Civil War I might have bought into the idea of war.
Exactly.
And then the space alien thing was when we went to take the class, it was in the Hilton that I stayed, and we also had the class next to it or whatever, and it had this enormous lobby. It was like 8 stories high, you know, and all the rooms were around the periphery of this huge lobby. Well, this life as an alien, I was on a ship, and then the next thing I know, I was in a like this front cement entrance to what looked like a glass dome, and I walked in it, and it looked just like that lobby, except it was all glass. And I stood there and I looked up at like maybe the 8th floor or whatever, and there was a panel of counsel, and they said they were chewing me out, not really, but they were letting me know in no uncertain terms that I had failed in whatever it was my mission was. And I just felt like, you know, like, boy, I'm getting chewed out, you know, not really, but it was a disappointment because I had failed. And I don't know what the subject matter was. Okay.
I want to mention a couple other things. When you talked about the explosion going off by, okay, no, wait, I'm going to back up and ask first and mention this. I have a memory of you telling me about this story before, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said before going in to take your bath, you had listened to the session for the first time. Is that true, or am I misremembering?
You are right. I had, I just said, you know, they said to listen to it a number of times. So I said, you know, and this was before I practiced. This was,
right.
a few minutes before I practiced, I just listened to the healing part. I wasn't going to listen to anything else. I just listened to the healing part, which was very short. I mean, it didn't.
And it was you, and it was you saying, I'm right here. It's just me. This sounds like I'm just talking like we're sitting on the sofa, right?
Right. So I when she said, "Can Lory?" she said it in such a mysterious way. Can Lory heal his back, or could you heal Lory's back? And it was like, you asking me this right this minute. So I just said, well, I don't know, I hope so.
Right.
You know?
And it just sounded like you and your own voice.
The conscious mind just said, I hope so.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to make sure. Okay. So that's number one. I wrote it down when you said this, when you said that the explosion happened by the window, and then that energy, do you know what word you used? The energy rifled through you.
It did.
So that I picked that on that right away.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying that, because the final story that you're going to ask me had to do with a rifle wound. Yes,
so, and we're going to talk about that too. But before we even move on to that, I also want to say, and as I'm saying this now, my body is buzzing wildly. You had this entire experience immersed in water. Water. Yes. Which we are talking about with the idea of, the beyond quantum healing, or some of the information that is coming through from Dolores and or Emoto from various sources, talking about the importance of using water in a session, drinking it, putting intentions in it. Even at the webinar we had in Missouri, talking about the idea of putting somebody's feet in it during a session, which all sounds a little hokey hooey and whatever. And even I didn't think to your specific session until you started talking about how your entire experience here happened with you kind of immersed in water. And I mean, I'm kind of imagining you kind of laying back and being really...
That's exactly what happened. But I do have to say, on top of that, that bomb exploding next to the window was really the orchestration of my higher self. That was orchestrated. But yes, the medium that I was in was water, and it did have a very vivid recreation going there.
Mm-hmm. That's really amazing. Okay. So go ahead and, one of the reasons I was trying to send something on the chat here, it said, I can't do that because not everyone's there. I don't know why. I was just going to say to Crystal, yes, thank you. Crystal, before we even got to that, was talking about that, that you were in water when all of this happened. And it's what I wrote down and mentioned just now out loud. You had some really interesting things happen subsequently about the Confederate soldier, and then something else, and another healing that happened to you. And this particular healing, and I want everyone to realize this too, it didn't even have anything to do with the session. I think, all of this study and all of these ideas and all of these other sessions and this work that we do brought you to a place where you had a healing that you literally watched happen. Just, I don't even know where you were, sitting on your own sofa or whatever. So go ahead and tell us that story.
Okay, so and then maybe talk later about the development of the Civil War thing.
Do either, whatever makes most sense for you, because I don't have all the facts straight, but both of these stories are amazing.
Well, they're all related, so I'll tell you the third story, which is, so I get back to Denver. I have the 2 miracles behind or under my belt, and then I still had some issues which developed, and so I said to myself, I had a cough that was just not stopping. It was like, I've had coughs all my life. This did not stop. And also, the weirdest thing happened. Living in Denver, I don't know what kind of spiders they have there. And one morning I woke up and it was like, I looked at my leg and it looked like I had gotten bit by some like nasty spider. And I monitored it for like a day or two. And instead of it like rising and becoming swollen or whatever, it sunk. Like, you know, when rain hits on a grave and makes it sink a little bit. And they said, well, what is this, a brown recluse or something? Is it eating my leg from within? You know. So I took my pants off at the dinner table and showed everybody just a little bit, you know. And sorry, Candace, this is
I'm just imagining.
Going on record. And everybody said, oh yeah, it is sunken, you know. And all I could think of was it looked like a bullet hole. It was that size. Well, as the days, weeks, and months proceeded, it changed, and it looked like the size of a chiclet, you know, chiclet gum, but not the little ones. They made those jumbo ones, which was about, you know, that size. And it was on my leg, my right leg, and it started to grow. And it was like blue and purple, and it didn't hurt and it didn't itch, but it was sort of like somewhere in between there. And it started to get thick. So it was about 1.5 inches or more, like subcutaneously and above the skin. And I didn't have health insurance, you know, part of my struggling life. And so I just said, what is this going to turn into? And so I finally said, you know, I'm doing all these healings, you know, all these sessions because, you know, I wanted to go to level 2 right away. So I had like 10 sessions, 15 sessions under my belt at that point. And I said, I'm talking to everybody else's SC. Why can't I talk to my own? So I said, well, maybe if you just, you know, because it was sort of there, even though I wasn't deeply entranced, so maybe I can just talk to it, you know. So I laid down and asked it for, you know, I don't know if I asked it for healing. I just sort of started to build a relationship with it. That's what I was doing, and said I loved it and show me more of who you are and all that stuff. And then at one point I said, all right, I'm just going to use my own voice. So I said, higher self, could I please speak with you? And then with my own voice, I said, yes. And then I said, could you heal my cough? And at that time, I was working with a whole bunch of people, and there was some people at the top that were very, very abusive. And I got an intuitive hit, like as loud as can be, that said, no, you are getting abused at work. And every time you cough, that's you saying no to the abuse. And I said, all right, that sounds, you know, I'll buy that, and I'll take note, and I'll think of that. And then without dropping a beat, I just said, could you, well, how about my chiclet on my leg? No sooner did I say those words, and all of a sudden it felt like, because I watched the movie Austin Powers, it was a laser beam. It felt like a laser beam stitching, you know, like horizontally the length of this thing, and then vertically the width of it. Like someone had stitched over it, patched over it with a sewing machine. And I almost think I heard crackling, you know, like how a laser beam would crackle as it's burning into metal or something. And after that finished, I was like so, you know, flabbergasted. I like second time in the same month, I pulled my pants down and I looked and it was gone. The patch that remained was what looked like burnt skin. It was sort of like, I don't know, skin colored, but like burnt. Like my cousin is a nurse, and I went to her immediately and she said, Lory, that looks like it was burned. The skin looks burned. And so I was just, and then a week later, there was a penumbra around the area that was red, and it was it was like it was expunging what had vaporized below the skin. And so someone gave me some clay and I put it on there and it sucked it out, you know, and so then it was gone. And over a year passed and I moved to Buffalo, and, you know, there was a couple little red spots on this patch. It was sort of beige and red. And almost like if you were sifting something, or if you had sand and you turned the vibration and it made a pattern, it seemed like as it was healing slowly, the skin finally turned back to normal. What remained was a dusting of red. And when I looked, it started to look like numbers, but I said, oh, what is this, 53 or whatever? Finally, it reached its final position, and it said 33. And I have a picture of it that is just incontrovertible.
Do you have that?
I do.
Go get that.
Well, I mean, it's on my phone, though. I don't know if this is good.
That's okay.
So now this is the second part of this story, and that is that, excuse me. Second part of the story is that prior to any Dolores Cannon activity, you
took a painting class, right?
I took a painting class. Yeah, sorry, I'm looking for this picture.
That's all right. I was gonna help you out here a little bit while you're searching. So Lory took this painting class, and the assignment was to paint a portrait. And I think that Lory just painted a portrait out of his own imagination, and
right.
he.
Yeah, they said to just you know, paint anything and just use your imagination. So I did, and because I was going to paint a picture of the people that I lived with, and I wanted to do a nice job, so I took a painting class and did that. And after I did that, it turned out that the person, it sort of painted itself. It was kind of weird. And then it looked like the person was a Civil War person. And I said, well, what's this about? You know, and so I made gold buttons on him, you know, and then I made epaulets like right here, just because I know that, you know, I like Van Gogh, and he painted a portrait of a postman. And so I sort of imitated that. And I tried to get those epaulets to look realistic, and they didn't. So I said to myself, all right, well, I will just fashion this one to look like a 3, which I did. And then I did the other one with the 3. So
yeah, like mirror image.
Yeah, and then it didn't look right, so I switched the other 3 to a real 3. And so, and I thought nothing of it other than, you know, that looks better. And I left it like that. And then I put it away, moved to Buffalo. And when I was decorating my apartment, I put this portrait up. And it wasn't a Confederate, it was a blue, you know, like a Northern, what was it called? A Yankee. And so, I had it up in on the ceiling there, and I had a client come, and she was super intuitive, and she looked at that, and she said, that person killed you in a past life. And I said, oh, I thought it was myself who had died in a past life. And Candace, I don't know where this is.
All right, let's put this up later as a link to the show. So don't worry about it, okay?
Okay,
now you can just finish telling your story.
I know, it's distracting.
It's okay.
I showed it to someone just the other day, so I thought it was right there. So she said, no, that person, that's a Confederate, and he was he was a Yankee, and he was from the 33rd Regiment. And I said, oh, that's what the 33 is. So I thought, oh, I will go Now, let me just back up 1 second. This was when they said the 3 waves of ascension, and September 28th of 2015 was the first wave. All that month, I was feeling like my insides were being burned alive. Like I was just, all the negativity was being burned up. I felt like I was being cleansed and purified. And they said the 28th was going to be the first ascension. And I said, I'm going through it right now. I mean, it really feels like it. Well, this was on the 28th. And when this client left, she said, that's the man that killed you. And he was from the 33rd Regiment. Well, I'm sorry to back up one more time, but I am an Emily Dickinson fanatic, and I've studied her all my life. And the sad part about Emily Dickinson, seemingly, was that she was so afraid to be public that at one point, a man who owned a publishing company said, anybody, he put this out in the newspaper, anybody that thinks they're talented enough to write, send me your poems and I will publish them if you're good enough. And she sent him epic poems that were mind-blowing. And he wrote back and said, sorry, you're not talented enough. And she continued to send him better and better poems, if they could even get better. And he rejected all of them. When she died, she hadn't published at all. And so her sister got him to publish her work, but he obliterated it. He said, I'll publish it, but I have to fix it because it's so bad. So he changed it all. So for the next 70 years, the American public only read his version of her poems. So I wanted to strangle him. And his name was Thomas Wentworth Higginson. Well, a couple of years ago, I lived with an artist. He was having a show. He invited me to Dartmouth College to hang the show. He said, I got you a bed and breakfast. You will stay there. I did. I came down to breakfast. The people that owned the bread and breakfast were there. And I looked at their wall of, things, like all these pictures behind me. And I looked at one of the pictures. I said, I know him. And the lady said, oh, you can't. She said, that's my great-grandfather. And I said, it's Thomas Wentworth Higginson. She said, you're right. And I said, well, I'm an Emily Dickinson aholic. And she said, oh, he was so wonderful and he helped her so much. It was like, I had to hold myself back from strangling her. And so just that's the background of Thomas Wentworth Higginson. Anyway, so the lady left. She said the 33rd Regiment, and she said, and I said, I have a 33 on my leg. And she says, well, yes, they would brand the people they killed with their stamp. Like we killed, the 33rd Regiment killed this Confederate soldier. So, and I showed her, and she said, yep, that's what it looks like. So she left, and I went immediately to the internet to see about the 33rd Regiment, and could I find a picture of that guy? Well, I found a picture of that guy, and he was the head commander of the whatever. And the 33rd Regiment, the supreme leader of that, it said Thomas Wentworth Higginson. And I said, what? And I looked, and then it had a link to Emily Dickinson, and that when he finally got out from the North, being the commander of the 33rd, he set up this newspaper and had a conversation with her, and all that stuff. So it was that day, the 28th of Ascension. It was like all of a sudden the veils were opening up, and I was seeing that maybe, I don't know why I'm so, Emily Dickinson is just like so part of me. So it's like, could I have been like part of her and this guy at the same time? Because it happened at the same, the 1860s. So, could that be, and that was my nemesis in that life, and you know what I'm saying? So,
I do. Just such amazing connections and so many fabulous stories. Since we were starting to talk about trance depth and proving healings, I wonder if you couldn't just talk about your own realizations right now. What trance depth and what mind state is that you've come to the conclusion is necessary to achieve some of the really miraculous healings that you've had, and also a little bit possibly about, and we ran out of time beforehand. I was going to talk to you about some of, because I believe you've had like scans and then rescans. We've had some of those questions. So if you would talk about, you know, mind states, trance depth healing, what you think are the real components, the necessary components for healing, and then some of maybe, you know, what you have for testing, and maybe a way that we can present that, or maybe places that you've already presented it to the public.
Yeah. Well, as far as all that proof stuff, I had a, I always get it wrong, X-ray of my back prior to it and afterwards. And my chiropractor went over it with me, and he did show me where the sacrum did not like shift, but the rest of the back straightened itself out. And he did, you know, he measured it, and he wrote the differences in measurement between the two, and I have those. And my foot, I mean, I didn't take a picture of my foot before, but everybody that knows me, my family, I could get people to testify, because I mean, they've lived with me all my life and known the whole thing. What other proof? The thing on my leg, I have people that were with me. My cousin Susan saw it. I took pictures of it before and after. So, you know.
Do you still have those pictures? And can you see the 33 on them? I think you might have sent one of those to me. I think you could.
Yeah, I did send you the 33 one. And I do have the picture. I know I emailed it off of my phone to me, so I just have to go dig it out of my emails.
Yeah, if I would have.
I went swimming with my iPhone, and it took pictures away, but maybe they're on the cloud. I don't know. But I do have them in email. I'd have to search them out. But depth of trance, you know what I learned from Dolores when in that last class that she taught? I sort of read all those books, and it was all, you know, somnambulestic, sort of channeled type of books. And so I said, you know, I had this miraculous healing, and it was lighter, but it, you know, and I said, you know, I was not in that deep state. And she said, yeah, we're seeing that now a lot more, that people's vibrations have raised, and they don't really need to go that deep. But I mean, I really had this, like, I really had this question for her, because it was like, you're saying everybody goes into this deep thing, and I'm living proof that you don't, or you don't have to.
Right.
Then what I found more helpful than any physical healing, and this is interesting, my brother asked me, he said, does it feel like a miracle, all this stuff? And I said, no, it feels more like that was a bad dream, and I woke up from it. So that's interesting. But more important than any physical healing was the realization that we are embers of God. Our soul is an actual piece of God, and it resides in-house. And our journey in ascension or enlightenment or awakening is to forge a relationship with this element, which is sort of the parent and the partner you never had. You know, the only one that can really give you love, the only one that can really guide you. And so to build a relationship, and that it is possible to build a relationship by just speaking to it. And so I went on a journey from that day to build a relationship with my higher self. And And in retrospect, I think what caused my healing, and I have a sneaking suspicion would help other people to heal, is that I was willing to change. I was willing to stop efforting, to let my heart melt by sort of like loving myself and calming down and trusting my higher self and learning to work with it like a co-pilot would work with a pilot. And by calming my sort of inflamed ego or my emotional mind, by calming it down and working more with the help and the guidance and the comfort of the higher self, I was able to start making choices from my heart rather than constantly from the brain trying to get ahead. And I'll give you a quick example, like rather than saying, oh, that person's brother-in-law works at the company I want to get a job at, I'm going to have them over for dinner and pick his brain. Instead, you don't even think like that. You just notice that she's depressed and you invite her over for dinner. And then she mentions, oh, my brother-in-law works here, you should get together with him. So it's sort of like your heart makes the choice and then everything works out rather than you, half a brain co-pilot, trying to enact the journey of your life rather than working hand in hand with the one that wrote the sequence of events in your life.
Can we go back? Can I ask you about your cough? You had a cough, and it was because of
abuse. Yeah.
And what, may I ask, happened with that scenario?
A week later, I went down to Mexico because the people I stayed with they had a house in Mexico and they've been wanting me to go forever. So we went down, and I got there, and there was a bowl of limes. A gigantic bowl of limes, and maybe 45 limes. And my friend said, I don't know what we're going to do with all these. And that night I couldn't stop coughing, and I went to the lime bowl. I cut one in half and squeezed the whole thing into a teacup, and I poured, they had honey, I poured some honey in there, and then there was some tequila because they had tons of tequila, and I put tequila in there, and I drank it, and I slept through the night the first time in like 3 weeks. And all I did was drink nonstop. I drank all of those 45 limes, and it went away.
You know what, Lory?
And probably a half a bottle of tequila.
Lory, you know what? I have to tell you something. I could pick up this computer right now and go show you, but I've got this bowl of limes in my kitchen right now. And one of the last things when I was getting my drink, do you see this? And it's got a little bit of juice in it.
Yeah.
Because I said, what am I going to do with this bowl of limes? I can't believe you're coming.
That's funny. Oh my God.
There's so many connections between people, between events, between things. It's just astonishing. The one thing that I want people who are attending this webinar to know, especially those of you who, were only around Dolores for your initial class or your only class, or maybe only online, that sentence that Lory said just a few minutes ago about that Dolores said, we're finding these things are changing, is so true. These were conversations that I had with Dolores in classes at the end of her life. That year, 2014, we would talk about it, and these amazing things that would happen in sessions, like I said, during the interview portion. And I know that you all, or I believe that you all have heard these stories before too, within classrooms and also within some of Dolores Cannon's lectures. Just being in the audience and listening to some of these stories, people were able to access whatever it was, make whatever changes they needed to have healing without going to the somnambulistic state. When we first put the support forum together way back in 2008, for a good many months, those first few people who came together and were asking each other questions, because we were all new, we would ask ourselves, what are we doing wrong? Because we found that not everyone went to the somnambulistic state, and we didn't find that everyone was healing. And we would ask ourselves, what are we doing wrong? And of course, it took a great deal of questioning and access to Dolores and time to pass to realize and understand a few things. Number one, we weren't doing anything wrong, and neither are you out there, not at all. And Dolores herself, again, towards the end of her life, would come to us and talk about how the somnambulistic state didn't seem to be necessary anymore for healing. But this is not how she taught, and it's not how she taught even to the end, and even in her final classes, she was not going to teach that. And it's because of Dolores Cannon and her style. Just because something new would come down, or some new realization would happen, or she would notice something changing or expanding or morphing or whatever, she didn't just start talking about it. She didn't just start teaching it. She didn't just start doing it. She wanted many examples of whatever it was to come down the road and be presented to her before she would use it, and particularly before she would talk to her students about it. So even there at the end, when she was noticing it, she still wasn't talking about it. And when she was doing her teaching, she was in that zone where she was teaching the way she was teaching. And she was, in her mid-80s, and everybody who knows people in that time frame, they can, and I will say that I believe Dolores is one of those people who she was very comfortable. She was very comfortable in doing things this way, and she was going to keep doing them. And it's not, if she was going to live another 15 years or 20 years, I fully expect and suspect that she would have changed some of these things in that way, but not until they were more solid, not until she saw them more. So she was seeing a lot of the things that we were seeing. She just wasn't ready to add that information into her classrooms to talk about it at the end. So I wanted to make sure that, we mentioned that. So even though she saw it, she wasn't really talking about it.
Yeah, Dolores was a consummate researcher and corroborator. She was very much scientifically focused, and she was very responsible in her findings and her research and her methods. So, but I know when she answered that question to me, for me, about, oh yeah, we're seeing a lot more that the vibration is raising and people don't need to go there. I was expecting not to be satisfied with her answer. And when she said that, it went into a different level in me, just like when on the 28th, I had that realization and all the veils of the different lives and the connections between the players in those different lives was revealed. It's like, I get it. The higher your vibration, the more everything opens up. The connections can be seen behind the veil, and it's all an orchestrated assembly of guides, spirits, players, realizations, thoughts, promptings. It's all like a soup, that without this amnesia, how do you say, amniotic fluid or whatever, that we can't see all the connections. Once it's lifted, it all fits together like a glove. And she was very responsible in what she was doing.
Yeah, she was. She was very careful. And I love that about her. She didn't just, she was like a sailboat who would, set course. And she was, she would have a direction just because some stray wind came through. She wasn't going to change course just because of that. So even though she was noticing some of this towards the end, again, that didn't make it into her classroom. So I don't see any questions or anybody asking anything in the chat room about any of this that we're talking about, but and we've been just past an hour, but I'm happy to hear any more thoughts. You know, one of the things that, if you don't mind, I'd kind of like to talk about. I don't know if this kind of aligns with our topic or not, but a session that you, Lory, did for me in March of 2015. I think you probably remember that session. We were there, and you were taking the level 2 class, and I was also there assisting in all the classes at the time. This is just a really interesting session that I've never felt that I've gotten completely somnambulistic either. I have a very strong analyzer, left brain, logic side of my brain. And what I found really so unique and interesting about the session we did, so Lory facilitated a session on me. And in a way, my brain was in 3 areas. So I was, wait, what are we looking at? Oh, back it off. You're too close. Back it off a little. Yeah, stop. Now hold it real still. Can y'all see that 33? That's amazing. Now go find that painting. It'll be even cooler.
There's my underwear.
Yeah, don't show that.
And then here's the painting.
Oh, good. Oh, good. He's going to show us the painting. So I'll pause my story while we go look at the painting. Oh.
Where is it?
Where is it?
Oh,
it's up. It's up. Oh. Oh.
Could you see the epaulets?
Yes. Now hold still. Isn't that amazing, everyone? Oh, gosh. Thank you so much. Thank you for showing.
I'm trying to show you the guy.
Yeah. There he is. And he looks at you all the time. All right.
I know he does.
I'm going to finish my story real quick. But anyway, my brain was in 3 parts. There was my conscious mind that was aware of absolutely everything. There was my higher self that was talking. And then there was, I don't even know if I've ever said this to you, Lory. I felt it was kind of like my teaching mind, you know, my assistant teaching mind. There was a part of me, I would speak as my conscious mind, my higher self, and even then like my teaching, you know, because I just finished walking from upstairs and, you know, helping, assisting in teaching in the level 2 and 3 classes. And so during the session, laying down and having the session, I could speak from any one of these perspectives, and actually kind of did too, you know, like, okay, here's teaching part of me saying something, and here's conscious mind part of me saying something, here's my higher self. And whenever I speak with my, and use my voice to speak for my higher self, it's exactly the same way you talked about it earlier on in the webinar when we were talking about it, that you just use your own voice, and you kind of, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of giggling inside when I'm doing it. You know, it's a little almost like joking, right? But that's the way we did it too. I actually was in a lot of pain. It was one of the reasons we had the session. I was actually in the emergency room. I had been in the emergency room in Arkansas. Happily, my husband was there taking excellent care of me. I had a kidney stone, and it, you know, it showed up on the scan, and I was needing to pass this kidney stone, and I knew that was going to hurt, and I didn't want to. So the idea was to have a session to have the kidney stone be dissolved, so I didn't have to pass it, because that hurts to pass kidney stone.
Okay,
and
you're back. You're back.
Yeah.
You cut up.
Oh, okay. So I wanted a session to pass this kidney stone, and my higher self said, okay, this is how, and I think about this all the time, especially when I'm walking, because I walk on these paths, these beautiful paths that my husband created for us here on our farm. And my higher self told me in our session that I could dissolve the kidney stone, but I had to do something very specific. I had to wear my earthing shoes, my earthing boots. They have little copper studs through the bottom, so you have direct electrical connection with the earth, right? I would have to walk 3 miles a day for a week or something like that, and then that would dissolve my kidney stone. And internally, I'm having an absolute hysterical fit about how in the world walking with metal on my feet on the planet is going to do anything at all for a stone inside of my kidney. You know, my logical part of my brain is having a field day throwing darts at how ridiculous this is, you know. But I did it anyway. And that whole week, it actually, you know, it was, I did it for a week, and we got all the way back, and I was like day 6 or whatever, and I was still in pain. And I went back to my doctor and got, he says, well, I want you to have another scan. And he sent me to go get another scan, and it's Friday, right? And I go get this scan on Friday, and I show up at, I don't know, 1 p.m. or something like that. And I show up at the place where they do the scans, and I'm in pain. And I hand over the paperwork to get the scan done, and the paperwork doesn't go through. And they were like, well, they put the wrong code on this. You know, we need to get another code. This is the wrong code. You can't have the scan. And there was like this paperwork snafu. So I sat in the waiting room, and at first I'm annoyed, but not for very long, because as we all know, you need to go, why is this happening, right? Why is this happening? And I literally was there for 2.5 hours. Waiting for, and they kept apologizing, and there was all these things, and this, you know, the fax machine didn't have paper, or I mean, it's just, you know, it went on, and I just sat there laughing because I knew something was up that was going to be helpful for me, even though I was in pain. And I end up getting the scan really late. So what happens then? It's late Friday. I get a medical scan late on a Friday. It's not going to get read. Right? Everybody, all the doctors, all the radiologists, they're out playing golf or whatever. That, you know, I'm going to get my result on Monday. So the whole time I'm thinking that's because I just need, I'm asking my higher self. Well, that's because you need a couple more days. You need the weekend to go and walk a couple more days with your earthing boots on the farm. And I'm still ouchy. I've done kidney stones before, and I was not a happy person. And I wake up Monday morning, and my pain is gone. It is completely gone. And first thing that happens after I make my coffee, the doctor calls with the results and says, honey, I don't know, why you were continuing to have pain, but you are completely clear. There is no kidney stone there at all. Now, see, what would have happened if I'd have gotten my scan early and gotten possibly my results early before having another couple days to walk? You know, my higher self or they or God or the universe set it all up so that I wasn't going to get any results till Monday, so that I could get the results that I needed. And it was just astonishing and amazing. And so when I think of you, Lory, I think about my, how I didn't have to pass that kidney stone, and how absolutely kind of convoluted and crazy that was. Go walk with these special shoes this long on the ground, and then your kidney stone will go away. It's like, what? You
never told me that story until now.
I didn't know if I did or not, so I thought I would.
So good. Would you write a recommendation for me?
Yes. Well, you're breaking up a little bit now too. My internet connection may be going a little wonky.
Would you write a testimonial for me?
I will, actually. I'll do that. Yeah. And it was fascinating for me too, because there was a part that, we as healers, it wasn't lost on me at all that I was spending my day in the classroom with Dolores Cannon's students teaching about self-healing, and I end up in a medical emergency room in Springdale, Arkansas. It's just surreal. It's absolutely surreal. And we won't go into the details and you know, about the root causes, but there's all, you know, so much makes sense. You know, it all makes sense. It's all completely for a reason. But you betcha, I will write you a testimonial.
That's funny. I never knew that it healed it. What I want to just say again is, you know, I've worked with a lot of people, and most people are not ready to change. They're willing to experience things. They're willing to open up. They're willing to give it a thought. But it's, I think, more than a deep state, you just have to be at the point where you are ready to change. And it means doing things differently. Yep. It means taking, you know, not being a victim, doing some research and learning about how we write our scenarios in life, and we're not victims, and then we have the freedom to react to them. It's all due to the amnesia, whatever. But we have to find a way to ask ourselves to, you know, show an issue, show what I find really, really important is that a lot of times the healing happens in a little while, and it's because you're being guided. And it might not just be a snafu like miracle. It may be that you have to change your perception. Like, I thought something was happening the other day, and I listened to and I thought it was someone doing something to me. And then I watched a Joseph Blavatsky or whatever video about hypnosis, and he pointed to he said, you know, if you're taking makeup off, you don't take it off of the mirror, you take it off of yourself. So I said that to myself. I said, well, maybe I'm going to take that look and say, is this me instead of that person? So I did what I could do in my thing, in my sphere, and it cleared up.
Wonderful.
So it, you know, it was like my higher self showed me, got me to watch the Joseph thing, got me to realize something. I made a change in perception, and all of a sudden the resistance I had to this person let go. And as soon as it let go, everything got better. And then when I realized it was really me, then it really left. So, you know, it's having this relationship with your higher self. It's being open to be shown things through intuition or signs or just faith that you want a change, you want a healing. You know, it comes in many different packages, but I think the biggest part of this all is to forge a daily relationship with your higher self and take care of your own emotions.
Okay. Actually, so in the question and answer room, Nina says the chat room is closed and we can't see both screens. We can only see the person speaking. So we didn't get to see the 33. We will make those images available to you all. And actually, I believe, well, I'm not sure. This interface is new, and it's one of the reasons, you know, we're going to practice and do this. I'm not sure what it will look like. I'm still trying to figure out what a viewer sees, what I see, what a panelist sees. But we will make sure to have the images of the painting and the 33 chiclet branding number on Lory's leg. All of you will be able to see that. We will make sure. I will put it on this video or links to it. Thank you so much for talking about, you know, making a change. I think what is about healing, what is important to understand here, you know, we as humans, we've been very much programmed, especially in the Western tradition, but we've been programmed that you don't heal yourself. You go to a doctor for healing. You go to somebody else for healing. And usually, you know, a medical professional, somebody who's been trained. The only people who can heal you are doctors. This is this, you know, this big fat program in our lives. And to even get some of us interested in the idea that we can heal ourselves by coming to alternative people like us who can help them and help facilitate some self-healing, that programming is still running a little bit, which is basically, I'm going to go do this to go get healing, which they still have the same kind of mindset. I'm going to go to Lory, I'm going to go to Candace, and they're going to heal me. And, you know, we try to take that away. We try to say, no, 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 that's not the way it works. But that program, you know, that those people have been running under is very, very strong. And so sometimes that's where the disconnect of why healing doesn't happen, because you're so right. There needs to be some sort of change made, because.
And I think a fundamental thing is when people come to me, I say, you may get, like, you know, fireworks and you may not, but what I'm doing for you is I'm showing you that it's possible to have a relationship with who you really are, and and start to identify with your immortality and start to work with it. And that's where interpersonal healing is, and you can access it. And if we don't get to it today, at least you will have a relationship started. You'll know how to do it, and it's just a matter of whether you'll work at it and start to get results.
So did you say fireworks on purpose or on accident?
Well, it just came out, but it probably was in there to begin with.
Ah, okay. Well, Lory, this has been so wonderful spending this time with you. I'd love to do this again at some other point, talk about some other sessions or some other cases that we, you know, might take us down that road. I want to thank you for your time today. I'd like to thank those of you also who have joined us today for taking the time out of your day to listen and to answer some questions and to make some observations about what's going on here. And for those of you who are watching in the future, the recording, look for more of these and let us know what you want to talk about. What kind of things can we talk about? What are you interested in as it concerns this work? There's always so much to talk about. I'm still a little taken aback by the limes, the lemon, and the water about all of this. There's so much more going on. Dolores, I think, has a lot more to share in these tangents of, you know, exploration of all of the different connections. The soup that you're talking about also, isn't that interesting? You know, liquid. the soup of all of what's going on. I think this is an exciting time to be a practitioner. There's more coming to light. There's more available to us. More people are hearing Dolores, including many practitioners out there. There's still, I would say, 80% of you out there are still too shy to share what you are hearing in their sessions and in your meditations and in your dreams about Dolores, but we'd love to have you share them publicly. I'm happy to hear it all privately, and I'm glad you're sharing in that way, but I'm hoping some of these people will come forward because Dolores has a lot to say on many other and expanded issues from her expanded perspective right now. Lory, this was amazing. Thanks again. Can you send me and find some good pictures, some JPEG images, send them to me, and I'll get them attached to this project, to this recording for everyone else to see.
Will do. Okay.
All right. Well, you have a great rest of the day. Thank you all for joining us, and see you next time. See you on the forum till then. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.